Financial leadership is changing. CFOs no longer record history. They make history. This podcast will help you become a better leader, strategic thinker, and digital visionary. Welcome to Secrets of Rockstar CFOs, the ultimate podcast for chief financial officers. Follow along as Jack McCullough engages in exciting chats with accomplished CFOs, learning how they overcame obstacles and positioned their companies for the future. Here's your host, Jack McCullough.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs. I'm your host, Jack McCullough. By day, I'm the president of the CFO Leadership Council. We have a great guest today, so let's get right into it. Let's rock, everybody. My guest is Ashim Gupta of UiPath, one of the hot companies out there. Ashim, welcome to the Secrets of Rockstar CFOs.
Thanks so much, Jack. Thanks for having me.
Been looking forward to this call for a while. And while UiPath has certainly been one of the great success stories, it's not exactly a household name like your prior employer. So maybe you could share a little bit about the company with our listeners?
Yeah, I would love to. So UiPath is an automation platform. I would say the automation platform for enterprises of all sizes. But what we do is, at the core of our offering, is to emulate what humans do. They're software robots. And those software robots then can do the basic mundane work that people don't like to do. And they use that incorporating artificial intelligence so that humans can do what they're meant to do, which is analyze, make decisions, really join as a team and solve tough problems. And around that core proposition, we've built other automation capabilities such as document understanding, the ability to identify through process discovery tough transactions or processes that are difficult to manage. And we sell that to enterprises all across the globe.
Interesting. And you've been with the company about 4 years?
Actually 5.5 now.
Oh, 5.5, my bad. So cool. Well, anyway, before we get into your career journey, which I think is of great interest to our listeners, I want to learn a little about your pre-professional life. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Franklin Lakes, New Jersey. Tri-state area all my life. Went to school at Rutgers as well. So I'm an East Coaster through and through.
Indeed. And did you come from a big family or?
I came from a big family in India. So my dad has 6 brothers and sisters. My mom had 2 sisters, and they had children of their own. But here in America, it was really my 2 parents and my older sister, who's an orthodontist. And we grew up really like a small nucleus family here. But when we go back to India, that's when it felt like a big family.
Yeah, one of those, you have a lot of first cousins, it sounds like, probably, right?
Exactly. I think it's definitely in the 30s for sure.
So interesting. And did you study business at Rutgers?
No, I was in economics and political science and double major. And I actually was a labor studies and women's studies double minor, which may sound strange, but my passion at that time was really to evoke social reform. And that was the impetus for labor studies and women's studies, or gender and ethnic relations. But through a lot of twists of fate, I found myself into corporate America.
Yeah, interesting. And you started your career at GE, is that correct?
Yeah, that was my first job. GE Appliances, to be specific, through their financial management program called the F&P program at that time, which was a rotational program. I spent my first 2 years there at GE Appliances, and then I continued for 19 years after that.
Okay, yeah, it's interesting because when I was looking at your profile, you don't hear a lot of people with a 19-year career at the same company. And yet, so you're a little bit unconventional in that sense, but GE to me is synonymous with corporate finance. I've always said you can take GE alumni, if you want to call them that, and, put them against Wharton and Harvard, and, they're going to stack up with any institution that's ever been. So what are some of the critical things that you learned during 2 decades almost at GE?
Yeah, what great leadership looks like. I got to work aside people like Steve Sedita, who is the CFO for GE Appliances, Dan Janke, who today is the CFO of Delta Airlines, Jeff Bornstein, the CFO of GE, and so many people, Brian Davies, who's a CHRO, who taught me a lot. And you really see what great leadership is. And it's, the clarity of thought, the ability to communicate, and then followed up with execution. Like GE knew how to go and solve problems and make things and take thoughts and put them into action and drive accountability. Those were some of the core pieces. But what was also great is they really valued, while they valued finance, every finance person was thought to be the COO of their domain. So you weren't a spreadsheet person, or if you were, that was the ceiling. You had to be immersed into the operations of the company, and that connection of finance and operations probably is the number one thing that's lived with me ever since, and has been ingrained in me pretty deeply.
Okay, interesting. And so you were there for 20 years. Did you have any mentors along the way, formal or otherwise?
Tons. Yeah, tons of mentors. Joe Allen, who I believe is the diversity officer now for GE Aircraft Engines, but held a lot of financial jobs, leadership jobs. He was an incredible mentor to me, and except like apart from being just really smart in core analytics, he taught me to have fun at work. So we would do operating planning and budgeting while sometimes shooting basketball in the parking lot. He was just a great person to connect with and laugh. And he taught me so much about communication and analytics when I didn't even know I was learning. And it's a relationship I value to this day. And then I mentioned Dan Janke, Heiner Markov, who is the CEO for GE Water. They really taught me about execution. And one of the things that Dan Janke actually said was no wasted motion. He really
That's great.
put that out into practice, and that was something that I'm still learning to this day.
Yeah, that's one of those things a lot easier to say than to do, right? So,
Exactly. And sometimes you think it's corporate speak, but I think the value of a mentor is not what they say to you. It's that they're examples, so you don't think it's corporate speak. You actually see it in practice. And so it gives you something to aspire to beyond being able to recite the quotation. And that's something I'm really grateful for that group for.
yeah, it's interesting because I've, publicly sometimes recognized some of my early career mentors. And occasionally, like a couple of them have said they didn't know that I viewed them in that way. But it's just, when you're in a company where you work with a lot of smart people who show an interest in your career, you end up with that mentor type of relationship, whether it was planned or formal or not, right?
Yeah, completely. And to be truthful, I'm sitting here almost feeling guilty because the list of all these great leaders and people who've been a helping aid or who've been a teacher to me, it's such a long list. And I don't want to leave people out, but we would literally use the entire podcast talking about that list, if I had the opportunity.
We've got 3 or 4 hours before my next meeting, so if that's really of interest to you. No, but I do know what you mean. So are you actively or, maybe inactively mentoring any professionals at this point in your career?
Yeah, I mean, I have 2 or 3 formal mentors, that have asked me to be a formal mentor. And then there's people that I would say, constantly coaching, whether that's, people on my team or just people who've been, a partner with me throughout my career that we still touch base. Honestly, for me, it's really hard, maybe being the younger brother in my household, to feel like a mentor. I think that I get as much advice though from a lot of the people that may be getting advice from me. I get a lot of lessons from them in return. So that's kind of the relationships that I try to build, as a mutual exchange relationship.
Yeah, I actually encourage CFOs to get a Gen Z mentor, for a number of reasons, not the least of which they're going to be running the world before too many more years. But,
It's
just
true, and there's a different language altogether with the Gen Z. Well, so they're teaching me how to stay hip, hopefully,
yeah,
or become hip, I should say.
is hip still a thing?
I they
Like,
would probably give me a different word for it,
yeah.
but I'm a work in progress.
There you go. Yeah, well, it came out not too long ago when Taylor Swift was dating Travis Kelce. Until that moment, I thought Taylor Swift was a male country singer. I don't know why. But yeah, so I said Taylor Swift's a woman, and like my nephews and nieces and the young people in my life, they were like, "Oh God, you need so much work." So it is what it is. But anyway, great, almost 2-decade run at GE, and then you left to join UiPath. Uh,
Yeah.
well, big company, small company at the time, but why that particular moment and why that particular company?
Yeah, so just maybe one step back is after I was in finance at GE, actually my last job in GE was the CIO for our shared service organization. And so, understanding technology and the impact that it was having in the corporate life, and corporate processes and customers, that was something that was really impressed upon me in that organization. I got to work with great technology and IT leaders, who taught me a ton. And UiPath was actually one of my was I was one of their customers. And so I got to meet Daniel, and honestly, the humility of Daniel at that time, and then on top of that, he was hiring 450 people, and we were literally firing 450 people at that moment, like through for cost savings. And
Yes.
I think that juxtaposition made me feel like I haven't been a part of a growth, like just where growth and tech really come together in my career. And that was something I aspired to be, and I was fortunate that Daniel would have me on the team.
For clarifications, Daniel's the founder and CEO of the company, is
Sorry.
that correct? Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel is the founder and CEO. Yes.
Okay, cool. And you weren't hired as the CFO. Your title was Chief Success Officer or Chief Customer Success Officer?
Customer success. So when I met Daniel, he's like, just join the company. And I honestly thought, given my background, he was going to hire me into finance. And then when we discussed it a little bit more, his thought was, you're a customer, go make other customers successful. And in software, this role is a pretty common role, that helps customers adopt and utilize and maximize the benefit of software. So that's how I joined. I had never really talked to a customer at GE in my life. And so my first job at UiPath was 90% of the time was building a team that is talking to customers and me myself talking to customers. And there was, speaking of mentors, John Rice at GE, who was a vice chairman. He said, "Go what makes you feel most uncomfortable." And talking to customers was the thing that I was most afraid of, and so that kind of led to excitement for me embracing the job.
Interesting. So, one thing I've learned is that CFOs actually are very successful in interacting with customers or people who are financial background. But here's a situation where you were doing it for your full-time job for a couple of years.
Yeah, and I learned a ton, and I had a budget imposed upon me by the CFO at that time, so I felt what it was like to operate under that budget and manage growth, and it really, that was probably one of the greatest learning experiences for me, in my career, because there's jobs where you know the content and you know that you know. There's jobs where you think you know the content, but you really don't know it. And then there's jobs where you know you're over your head. That was the customer success role was a job of the third category for me. Like I didn't know anything. So every morning I was awake trying to learn, and it was really exciting.
Yeah, to me, it was eye-opening because I went from being a CFO to a CMO in a different company.
Wow.
But my new coworkers, they would laugh at me because it was tough for me to give up the CFO mindset. I remember one saying, "Did you just have an argument with yourself?" Um, I was arguing like both positions. So, but anyway, it sounds like an interesting role. And you eventually went back to a CFO type of role or went to a CFO role at the company. But what did you learn from that role that maybe is making you a better CFO even today?
Yeah, context is everything. And so in the CFO role, you think about the numbers, you think about meeting expectations, you think about the quarter in particular. Customers, they care about, those are the last things that they care about. And actually, a lot of the conversations that you're building with your customers, they're for revenue 1 year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now. And I think that role really gave me is customers are the lifeblood. Like I knew it in word, but I didn't know it in practice. And especially if you're growing the top line, if you believe in the market you're in, if you believe in your technology, customers are the source of your product roadmap, can be. They're the source of your strategy. They're the greatest points of feedback on your organizational structure and design. And so, from a CFO perspective, I think staying in touch with the field, not rising to any type of ivory tower and looking out upon an area, but really going and continuing to hear that unfiltered feedback from that perspective, that was the lesson from that job that I really take with me. In addition to how hard it is to build something. So one of the things at UiPath was that was an organization that was nascent, 12, 15 people that had to scale to 250 people. I've always run things, I hadn't built things. And I think building is a skill that I have so much more respect for. And how to interact and how to fund builders, I think is an important skill set for a CFO to embrace.
Yeah, and there was a time when the CFO was a back office type of job that would have been, you would have just wasted 2 years of your life almost, right? You can't bring it back. But it's CFO, the type of CFO that you are, and a lot of your contemporaries, where you're strategic, you're forward thinking, you're helping grow the business, that had to have been an invaluable way to spend a couple of years. So
It was really incredible, really incredible.
right. So you moved back to a CFO role in 2019, and the company did an IPO in 2021. Was the thinking when they hired you in the CFO type of role that, hey, things are going great, we need professional world-class financial leadership to maybe execute an exit? Or, was that kind of in the back of your mind at the time?
No, so actually it was completely the opposite, Jack. So the reason why I got into the CFO job was the company was going through a transition and we were really actually hemorrhaging cash at that moment, and just for a lot of factors. And they just needed support to get certain processes back on track. That was the main impetus for me to be the CFO. I was never intended to be a public company CFO. So the thought was do that for a couple of years, bring in a CFO, and then I could support them at that time. Through again a lot of twists of fate, earning the confidence of our founder and of our board, I got the opportunity to be the CFO and take the company public. But it's unusual for, at least at that time, our scale. We were going to be one of the most valued IPOs at that time. To give that CFO job to somebody who never had a public company CFO job in their area. So it was a lot of learning and a lot of adapting for me, and a lot of, honestly, just luck to get to be in that position at that moment.
I think you're giving luck too much credit. I'm sure you worked your butt off and made some great decisions along the way. But anyway, so that might have been the worst question I ever asked, though. Were you brought in for the IPO? Absolutely not. So, but it worked
Yeah,
out.
but it worked out well. But it's interesting for finance professionals. You never know what you're going to get, and then how to prepare. And I will tell you, like, it was a really good lesson of just do the best job you can at that moment and prepare for the best. You never have to really prepare for the worst.
I mean, IPOs, and I've spent most of my career in the innovation sector. And so for most CFOs I know, IPO is kind of the holy grail, right? I mean, they're a great thing, but the reality is most companies don't get to that level. The ones that high flyers often are acquired before the IPO comes along. But nonetheless, you actually executed a successful IPO. So tell us a little about what that was like. Your first time doing it, exciting, nervous? Walk us through if you would, Ashim.
Yeah, all of the emotions of the above. It was, in the timeline that it was there, I think it was a combination of feeling the pressure because everybody's relying on you for doing all this work to get to that moment. And like you said, very few companies get to that mountaintop, but it's on the CFO in a major way to get there. And so I think that there was a lot of pressure at that time. And so one, surrounding yourself with people who know the public markets and preparation. So get the best bankers, get the best lawyer, surround yourself with the best team members that you can who have experience in that area. That was really helpful for me. But what's fun about the IPO is you're essentially selling yourself to the world, to the public markets. So you get to see the first part of it is building your S1, which is showing your strategy and your business to everybody out there. And I remember going through that with the leadership team. You almost, like, it's like renewing your vows. You like realize why you joined the company. Like you start talking about the market size, about your technology, your competitive advantages. It's really motivating to do it. The second stage of that is preparing your financial statements and making sure you're ready for the IPO. do you have the right accounting background? Do you have the right policies? Because you don't want to get to the public markets and then say, wow, I have something major to change. And that was like very technical. We went through rev rec and accounting policy reviews and changes that were there. So that was like the core geeky fun of finance. And then the third piece is starting to prepare what life is like after. So you would actually, the year before the IPO, we ran it like a public company. We would close like a public company, do mock earnings calls. And so like just getting into the mindset of game day, that was the third piece. And it's a lot of fun. There's a lot of pressure along the way, but it definitely was a lot of fun.
Now, in 2021, were you doing traditional roadshows at that point in time, or was it more virtual than it had been?
No, it was fully virtual. So
Okay.
COVID,
fully.
we were actually we started doing it like in the midst of COVID. And so our test the waters, which is the pre kind of IPO, we actually did not even in an office location. We did it at a pretty remote area. So just to be very safe. And then the roadshow was 100% virtual. And we did that in New York, which was an incredible experience. But you didn't get the full roadshow the way people talk about whisked off on this plane ride, going through these all-day meetings, grabbing lunch, at a local store. It was very much locked in a room in a two-dimensional environment.
Yeah, it's a little different than in my era. I never did one as a CFO, but as a controller, I was allowed to participate in it. So an observer and whatnot. And it's an incredible whirlwind. I mean, it's the most exciting from a business perspective experience I ever went through. So, but cool. So anyway, one thing about an IPO, and they're great, companies, start, thinking that there might be an exit. But they do change everything. It's sure it's a financial event, and other than the actual founding of the company, it's the biggest event in a company's history for the most part. But at the same time, it can change everything. So you're now a public company. So how do you, as one of the leaders of that company, balance sort of the startup culture and the innovation mindset with the realities of now you're being a publicly traded company? It changes the entire game, right?
Yeah, it's something I still think even a couple of years later we're going to adapt to, because you also are changing to changing market conditions. So the way I look at it is now you have two things that fundamentally change. One is you have a completely different shareholder or stakeholder base that has expectations of you that you have to meet in addition to your employees and customers. So balancing short-term versus long-term, balancing the long-term investments that you have to make with conviction, even if short-term you're going to get speculation or skepticism from a shareholder base, that's the hardest thing. What's interesting about it is shareholders are actually really smart. So when we go through our callbacks, the questions they ask and where they poke on, honestly, 8 to 9 times out of 10, they're correct. They're not looking for the quarter, but they'll challenge you whether you're making the right things. The other interesting area is how do you adapt your metrics? So like when we went live at the IPO, cash was not valued as much as it is today in a 5% interest rate environment. So when you change your strategy pre-IPO, it's really around growing the business.
Okay.
Now, how you grow the business is related to your largest currency, which is your stock price, right? The cost, your ability to have a high valuation gives you the ability for M&A, stock-based compensation impacts, et cetera, employee morale. So how do you decide what are the things you adopt to and what are the things that you have enough conviction to say, I'm going to take a hit for that, but I believe in doing it? Those discussions they're the hardest discussions to have internally. And I don't know if there's anything that prepares you for it until you actually go through that process.
Yeah, it's interesting. It is one of those things that you can read books about it. You can talk to your friends and other people that have gone through it, and the bankers and all the other advisors you have. But living with it is just, you can't prepare for the realities once it's done. So cool. Well, I wanted to chat with you a little bit about, because and please correct me if I have my facts wrong, because I got it from your website, but you have co-CEOs in Daniel Dines. Does he go by Dan or Daniel?
Daniel.
Daniel. Like I said, Daniel Dines, who is one of the founders and the co-CEO, and then Rob Enslin, who's the CEO. And I'm curious how that plays out because there's been a lot of research, and Accenture famously reported on it, that the CEO CFO relationship is the most critical within the C-suite. Just if they're not that they have to hang out together on weekends or anything like that, but they need to be on the same page and challenge each other and be candid with each other and basically lead the company together. But you're in a situation you've got two CEOs, so I'm curious what that dynamic is like on a day-to-day.
It's actually there's pluses and minuses to it. Just to be fully authentic, I'd love to say everything's perfect. I think one point of background is Daniel's mindset as an engineer, and he is a product and engineering expert. And Rob's mindset is a go-to-market leader, and he is a go-to-market expert. He's probably one of the best go-to-market leaders in software. Not just from me, but when you hear that from many people externally as well. And so when you put that together, what's fun about it is you actually have you have the right brain and the left brain at maximum force together. And so for me, that keeps me on my toes of making sure, like, am I balancing enough and connecting enough those dots between it? The benefit is I think our strategies and our discussions are richer because you've got two full loaded pieces of energy with great expertise coming to the discussion. The difficulties can be how, especially today when everybody's traveling and moving around, it's just one more logistical challenge to get everybody in the same room for important discussions, to have those discussions together. So it requires real time commitment from us and planning. So we are actually discussing things together. And that's a little bit more challenging. So you can't just call, like, tomorrow I can call Daniel on the phone, but then I wouldn't have Rob, right, on a one-on-one relationship. I can call Rob, I talked to him this morning, but then you got to follow up with Daniel, or they have to follow up. So logistically, it just adds one extra leg to be able to do it. Personally, I think we're better for it. That being said, Daniel is actually transitioning out of the full-time CEO role as of February. And so Rob, is going to step into that job full time, but a founder never leaves his company. So I think that dynamic will still continue to be there throughout. But for me, it's been great so far. There's pluses and minuses, some challenges, but on the whole, I think we're better for it.
That's great. Do you think that might be a model other companies would be well advised to adapt going forward, the co-CEO?
I think it depends on your company.
Okay.
I think it depends on your company's state. I think it depends on your area. I mean, look, Daniel focusing his time on AI 100% is an amazing asset for us. And Rob running the day-to-day operations and go-to-market, for us, that works, and that has worked really well. Listen, it really depends on your company. If a lot of companies don't have founders, right? So if you look at Workday actually did something similar with their founder and a co-CEO structure that's going to transition to a full CEO structure. I think it's a really great way, though, for founders to start moving out of a role that they don't want to do full time of the demands of a day-to-day operational CEO. I think it's a great model for that transition. I don't know if it's a great model for every company itself.
Okay, fair enough. So cool. Well, one thing I know a real source of pride for you is the team you've built. And so I want to, pick your brain a little bit. So what are your, secrets of building a world-class team? Because it's never been harder for CFOs than it is right now with, talent shortages and the multi-generational workforce. And, people are not entering the profession in as high numbers as they did at one point, and they're leaving for other opportunities. So, what are some of the challenges you face? Because I know you've got a great team.
Yeah, the first is like making sure in the rush to get talent, you don't sacrifice diversity. And I'll define diversity not just as gender or not just as ethnicity, but really a background of expertise and skill set. So if you look at my team, I have an incredible IR leader, Kelsey Turcott, who's been around software, who's been in investor relations forever, right? And she has such great connections. She's taught me so much because that is, as a newer CFO in the public markets, that's different for me. I have a chief accounting officer. This is his first chief accounting officer job, but he was a partner with a Big Four. So completely different background than being
Sure.
in industry. And then I have two FP&A segments, one for commercial, one for total company, and they're rising stars. FP&A is a stronger skill set for mine. So I think don't sacrifice diversity. That's like the first mindset. The second is don't go to your comfort zone. I try not to hire people I know from the past in large numbers because it creates cliques, it creates biases, and it reinforces biases when you may need a different thinking into the company. Um, and the third is, to be honest with you, make sure there's chemistry. I think like you can have all the skill sets, you can have the smartest people, but if you're not going to have fun along the way, it's really hard to get through challenging times. So like injecting as much fun and laughter and making sure the chemistry of the teams are there, that's really important as well for me.
Okay,
So
cool.
patience in a tough market is probably my number one thing that I try to keep myself to.
Well, and how big is your finance and accounting team at this point?
So in total, we're around 300 people. And then when you add in IT and procurement and other operational functions, it's north of that. But that's the general size of it.
Okay, cool. Excellent. And, I think I would probably be doing our listeners a real disservice not to ask you about AI. And, to me, the biggest game changer since the World Wide Web in the 1990s, it's at that level. And, maybe the biggest one we'll experience during the course of our careers. But um, what should CFOs and I suppose executives in general be thinking about when it comes to generative AI? Top of mind issues for them?
I think the first thing is play offense more than you play defense. That's my mindset
Oh,
with
I'm
the new
stealing
technology.
that. So,
And so a lot of times you start with the fear factors related to them, but start with the benefits of what they can provide and find ways to infuse that that culture to find different ways to do it. Can I do variance analysis using generative AI? Absolutely yes. Can I write accounting memos using generative AI and reduce time for my accounting team? 100% yes. Can I use AI even beyond generative AI like automation and make sure that I'm able to maximize my processes so people can spend more time on analytics and decision making? Yes. Those are methods of offense for me in terms of how I would characterize it. And the other piece is really make sure on your team you have what IBM used to call penguins, people who walk a little bit differently. Because when you put new technology in the hands of old mindsets, you don't get to really understand it. And so make sure you have a few people who everybody looks at and say, wow, they're cowboys. Or, they're spirited and it's gonna be an issue. So from that perspective, I really would make sure that you have the right mindset of people on your team to extract the benefits of
that's great. And, I have to ask you the question, do you see the day, and I don't mean tomorrow or next year or even in 5 years, can AI do your job? Do you think an AI can replace an executive in a company? So,
it. I think it can do parts of my job.
mm,
I think that if you look at some of the things that I do today, interpretation of data, I think AI can absolutely do it. Identifying trends to highlight to operating partners or operating leaders in the company to make them aware of it as they build strategies, it can absolutely do it. Going and making sure that I'm listening and understanding to the next set of emerging issues, I think AI can create signals from a lot of data that it can provide to to the CEO. Being a strategic partner to your CEO, being a leader to develop your teams, um, and being a real operational support for customers, I don't think AI can do. So for me, what AI will do is elevate the position itself and take the parts that I shouldn't be doing and doing it in a different way.
interesting. The reason I asked is a study by Gartner recently that it's like 60% of finance teams have no near-term plans to embrace Gen AI in a particularly aggressive way. And one of the reasons, and there are many reasons, partly there aren't enough skilled people to lead the effort, but one of them is employees are nervous about AI replacing them, right? It's sort of like embracing AI is sort of like training the person who's going to take your job from you. So
It's so funny, I laugh at it because if you look at it, one thing that's true is like humans are resilient. We used to have thousands of workers on an assembly line before manufacturing processes were automated, right? I was joking around because one of my old colleagues, Excel was a new tool for them. Before that, they would tell me how they used to open these big graphing books and be writing stuff. So Excel was a massive productivity change. You still have finance people today doing that, even with that level of automation of closing the books, right? So I feel like humans adapt and are resilient, and we should never be afraid of technology. I think it's an ungrounded fear that you have to face at some point because technology, there's no harnessing it. It's going to consume. Like it's not controllable. You can't say, don't let it into my house. It's not possible.
I mean, I tell people when I graduated from high school, I majored in accounting, and a lot of people advised me not to do it because technology would replace all accounting jobs. And these were not, these were
Yeah.
smart people, my guidance
Yeah.
counselor, people who were, engineers and even other accountants told me this. And boy, it would have been hard to give less accurate advice. Technology created a lot of jobs. It didn't kill jobs. And, there'll be some transitions without a doubt, but I think long term it's always been good, and this probably will be too. But I want to ask one thing of you, and it came up before we started the recording, but the 1-day close. So
Yeah.
your team is doing a 1-day close, is that correct?
That's kind of like we're on the path. Cost is almost there. And a lot of it is the thought that says we got to spend less time looking backwards and more time looking forward. And that was kind of the rallying call for the team. But it's possible. I think we're like 97%, 98% of our cost was booked by 1 p.m. or absolutely known by 1 p.m. on November 1st, which was our quarter close. We close on a fiscal day. And we're still not satisfied. We want to keep going with revenue, et cetera, from that perspective.
It's amazing. I mean, I'm obviously older than you, but I remember the 15-day close. And, when we cut it to 10, there were, high fives and celebrations that were a paragon of efficiency to close the books 2 weeks at the end of the quarter. So it's incredible to think that you're closing the books in hours. So good for you and your team. But so I want to ask Ashim, because you're a public company CFO, and that can be all consuming. But I want to ask, how many kids do you have? Obviously a father,
I
your
have
most important role.
I have 3 kids, 10, 8, and 6, 2 girls and a boy. And yes, that is the role that I cherish the most, even though I can do a better and better job in that job, is what I every day is teaching me.
Where does the boy fall in?
He is the youngest,
Oh,
and
okay.
he knows he's the youngest. We live, my wife's parents live with us. So he's got 2 older sisters, a mom, and 2 grandparents, and he is the baby of the entire house. And I have a sister who has a 17, a 14, and a 13-year-old. So he is the most spoiled child because everywhere he goes, he is the baby.
Yeah, it's interesting because the reason I ask, I was the only boy with sisters too, but I was the middle child. So, but I was kind of spoiled, but I didn't have the middle child syndrome thing either, because being the only boy, they sort of canceled each other out. So, but it's pretty cool. I think there's an advantage to the boy being older because, as he gets older and of dating age, he can date some of his sister's friends. So, but
I am very worried that he will not also be able to help me as my daughters go into their own journey. I'm looking for a partner because I'm not the largest of people in the world. So
yeah, I play that role. I don't have daughters, but I have several nieces. I do play that role of the psychopathic uncle. Hey, Sarah's father's a nice guy. I'm not. So just want you to keep that in mind. I've had those pleasant conversations. But anyway, I always like to wrap things up with, on a personal note, is there like a fun fact? Do you have an interesting hobby? Something about you that might be surprising, even like a go-to joke that you might have?
yeah, well, I have a lot of jokes, but probably the fun fact is I play classical Indian drums. They're called tabla,
Okay.
and maybe for the last 10 years, I play them every single day. And even if I travel with them. And so I'm one of the few people who has a checked-in bag everywhere he goes. Um, and so even for 10 minutes in the morning in a hotel room, even covered in towels so I don't disturb the neighbors, I will play. You play them with your hands, and I will make sure that I practice. And that just keeps me grounded in life, I would say.
I don't imagine you have them next to you by any chance, do you?
No, I
Oh,
don't. They're actually they're at the hotel because I'm going to be leaving for San Francisco on Wednesday, and they will be on the plane with me.
oh, okay, nice. So, well, that's really that's pretty interesting. Do you do it? Is it just a hobby and relaxation, or do you do it in a band or anything like that?
No, I mean, like I can play with people, but I'm far from a professional. I'm not really gifted at it. But I play it mainly as a hobby. But I can jam if the time demands it. I can put on a beat or put on a little bit of a show if I needed to.
Okay, that's great. Well, I play a mean air guitar, so when we meet in person, we'll have to get
That
together
could be
and
pretty
work
cool.
that out. Yeah, I have no musical talent whatsoever. So cool. Anyway, this was terrific. I want to give you an opportunity. Any closing thoughts that you could part, helping the next generation of CFOs achieve some of the successes that you have?
Yeah, I would say one is like don't be confined with paradigms of what a CFO is supposed to do. Like everybody has such an incredible journey, and usually it's the parts that aren't core finance that make that CFO something really special or gives them a unique perspective. So as people are growing in their careers or doing things, do the things that are like, I think it's Robert Frost, take the path less traveled. And that will make all the difference. And the second is have fun. I think sometimes finance can be a conflictual role. People want to be above their budgets. People are arguing over metrics. Laugh at it. You kind of have to laugh at human nature. And, I wish I had less stress early in my career around those things and just to use it as a place to enjoy the interaction with other humans.
Fantastic. Well, congratulations. You're our first guest to quote Robert Frost on any of our episodes, or any poet to the best of my memory. So cool. But anyway, Ashim, this was wonderful. I know you're a busy guy, so I really appreciate your time. And thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Jack.
Thank you for listening to this episode. To continue your exploration of this role that focuses on strategy, leadership, finance, and technology, listen to more episodes of the show at rockstarcfos.com. Join this revolution, episode by episode. Push yourself to achieve great things and unlock the best opportunities available to you. CFOs are creating a legacy, and it's time for you to leave your own unique imprint on the world today. That's all for now. See you on the next one.